Good evening. It's Super Tuesday. The voting is done. The results are coming in and reaction is strong. Thanks for joining us for our special primary election coverage. I'm Maya Trabulsi.
And I'm Amita Sharma. It is a big night and we have coverage on all the major races, beginning with the presidential results.
Victories tonight for Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden as 14 states take part in Super Tuesday. The big prize, of course, California. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler has been tracking the Democrats all night. He's in our newsroom with results and reaction. Max.
Hi, Maya. It was a great night in California for Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders as he looks to come out ahead in the delegate count. Of course, it's early yet. We're still waiting on results from a lot of places. People are still in line across the state. But as you can see, Bernie Sanders now with almost 29% of the vote, Michael Bloomberg with 18.4% of the vote, and Joseph Biden with 17.8% of the vote. Nationally tonight, Biden did come out ahead in many states, including across the South, and with surprise victories in both Minnesota and Massachusetts. Earlier tonight, Biden spoke in Los Angeles to supporters. And also, Bernie Sanders spoke to supporters in Vermont, where he won that contest as well.
We need a president who can fight, but make no mistake about I can fight. But look, we need as badly, someone who can heal.
One of us in this race led the opposition to the war in Iraq. You're looking at him.
So as you can see from these clips, Sanders is now turning his attention to Biden in terms of trying to make this a two-man race. The primary after tonight will now be extended well into the spring. The question becomes, will Sanders be able to use California as a springboard, or will Biden's support among the South be able to translate into a commanding victory in Milwaukee at the National Convention? California had moved up its date that it voted. It moved up to the March 3rd in an attempt to make sure that its voice was known, that everybody heard it. And certainly California voters have sent a message, and the message is strongly in favor of Bernie Sanders. How much that he's going to win today is going to be seen in the weeks ahead as they continue to count the votes. Back to you, Maya and Amita.
Thanks so much for that, Max. And all eyes tonight on the hotly contested 50th congressional seat. That's the one left vacant by Republican Duncan Hunter Jr., who resigned in January after pleading guilty to a felony charge of stealing campaign funds for his personal use. One Democrat, Amar Campa-Najjar, and three Republicans, that are Carl DeMaio, Darrell Issa, and Brian Jones. They're squared off in this race, and looking at the latest numbers right now on the screen, we're seeing Amar Campa-Najjar at 33.9%, Darrell Issa at 25.3%, and Carl DeMaio trailing right now at 21.4%. And to another very interesting congressional race, this one in the 53rd District, where Democrat Susan Davis is stepping aside. After nearly 2 decades in the House, the Dems looking to hold on to this seat. Candidates Sarah Jacobs and Georgette Gomez are running for the Democrats, and Chris Stoddard and Famila Ramos for the Republicans. The numbers right now for the top three: Sarah Jacobs at 29.6%, Georgette Gomez at 17.6%, Chris Stoddard at 13.5%. Turning now to the big race in city politics. That would be the San Diego mayor's race, where Kevin Faulconer is termed out. Speculation is that Faulconer may have his eye on Sacramento and the governor's seat as a Republican. Among the top candidates looking to fill the seat, Barbara Bree, Todd Gloria, Scott Sherman, and Tasha Williamson. Looking at the numbers right now, we're seeing Todd Gloria leading the pack at 39.5%. Scott Sherman is at 26%, and Barbara Bree not far behind right now at 24.4%. Now to break down how the county supervisor races are taking shape. Officially, now these are nonpartisan seats, but Republicans hold 4 of the 5 seats. Let's start with District 1. Longtime Supervisor Greg Cox is termed out. The race now includes real estate attorney Rafael Castellanos, Community College Board President Nora Vargas, and State Senator Ben Hueso. And results are showing Ben Hueso in the lead so far at 31.1%, Rafa Castellanos at 17.1%. Now to District 2, the largest in the county. We're seeing a big change with Diane Jacob leaving office after 28 years on the board. Poway Mayor Steve Voss chasing the seat along with fellow Republican Joel Anderson, a former state senator. Also, Kenya Taylor, a Democrat, trying to slip the district. A check on the numbers shows Joel Anderson clearly in the lead so far at 37.9%. Steve Voss at 34.2% for the Republicans. And finally, to the 3rd District Supervisors race, incumbent Republican Kristen Gaspar facing off against 2 Democrats. We're seeing Escondido City Councilwoman Olga Diaz and UC San Diego professor Tara Lawson-Remer. And we're seeing the numbers so far, Kristen Gaspar at 47.7% and Lawson-Remer at 28.3%.
Some very telling results among the major races tonight. Let's take a moment now to discuss what's taking place. To help us do that, we are joined by Chris Genowine, editor and publisher of the Times of San Diego, and Seth Coombs, former editor-in-chief of San Diego City Beat. Chris, let's just plunge right into this. Bernie Sanders taking California. The race is too tight to call in Texas, but it looks like between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, but it looks like Joe Biden has 8 big wins, and Bernie's got his own state in addition to California. He's got Vermont, he's got Utah, he's got Colorado. What did the endorsements in the last 24 hours of former Democratic presidential candidates Amy Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg, and Beto O'Rourke do to this race? Did it provide clarity, unity? What did it do?
Well, it supercharged the race for Joe Biden. He was already coming out of a blowout victory in South Carolina, and those quick endorsements answered the question that I think a lot of centrist voters had in America, which is, who do I vote for on Super Tuesday? A lot of Californians that I talked to, certainly those who are middle-aged and older, were waiting. They wanted to see what happened in South Carolina, and then you add into that those endorsements. And what many people are saying is this is the most dramatic political comeback in recent American political history. It'll depend a lot upon California, but essentially the 2 candidates, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, are running neck and neck on total delegates. And there are a lot of states still to come, like Florida, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, that may not be as friendly to Sanders, much more friendly to Biden, because they're more centrist states.
Seth, we were talking about this before the show started. You thought I was being hyperbolic, but going forward, how big of a fight do you see for the soul of the Democratic Party between these 2 men, Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, as they go forward in the next primaries?
I don't think you are being hyperbolic. I mean, there is going to be a battle ahead. I mean, let's just keep it real. So, yes, I think that there are going to be some states that go to Biden, obviously, and there are going to be more states that go to Sanders. I think come the summer convention in Milwaukee, it very well could be that neither one of them has enough delegates to receive the nomination outright, in which case you are likely. What I would think would happen would be there would be like some sort of contested convention where some of those delegates that went for Buttigieg in Iowa, I was about to say Ohio, but Iowa, end up flipping to Biden, and they end up casting their, and in which case the Sanders people are going to be very upset. And sorry, go ahead, Chris.
And some of the Bloomberg votes, Bloomberg has done, has gone over the threshold in some states. Some of those will go toward Biden as well in a brokered convention.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if nothing else, we're either going to have, we're not going to have a clear victory, perhaps, but we'll almost certainly have a brokered convention then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, well, I have a very quick question for you. I want to turn our attention to the 50th Congressional District. It looks like Democrat Amara Campa-Najjar has a lead over Republican challenger, former Congressman Darrell Issa. He's going to make the runoff. But what does he do to win this going forward when the entire Republican Party in that, the entire Republican votership in that area is likely to unite behind one single candidate?
Well, I think that's the big challenge for him. You know, at the rate he's doing right now, which is 34%, he's behind the 47% that he got in 2018. And if you add up, if you take Darrell Issa's vote and Carl DeMaio's and Brian Jones and add them up, that's over 50%. So he's got to get more votes. He's probably going to have to get some help nationally from the Democratic Party. He's going to need some much more help locally. It's If he was at 50% right now, he'd be better.
And we're going to have to close it there. We'll look at the other congressional races when we return. We've got a long way to go tonight. More results, more races, and we'll talk more with Chris and Seth in a moment. Right now, though, there is more reaction coming in. A large crowd gathering at Golden Hall watching what has been taking place so far. And that's where we find KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen. Andrew, what do you have for us?
Well, Amita, it's not quite so much of a large crowd here right now. You can see behind me there are some screens with the election results being posted to sdvote.com as they come in. We've been waiting for an update since the first results posted just after 8 o'clock. But one of the measures that we are watching right now, and one of the biggest measures in the city of San Diego, is Measure C. Now, this is the measure that would increase the city's hotel room tax in order to pay for an expansion of the convention center and also fund some homelessness services and road repair. We caught Mayor Kevin Faulconer, current Mayor Kevin Faulconer, earlier this hour, and this has been one of his biggest legacy projects, something that he's been campaigning for very, very heavily. And we asked him when exactly he's expecting to get some finality to these results. Here's what he said.
It could be later tonight, it could be tomorrow, or who knows. But to see those strong early returns, I think was heartening because it is very tough to get two-thirds of folks to agree on anything. But we pushed very, very hard because I think San Diegans understood how important these issues were, something that I certainly feel strongly about and been pushing very hard for. So cautiously optimistic that it'll continue to trend in the right way, but we'll see.
Now, you might have heard Faulconer there saying that you do need a two-thirds majority in order for this measure to pass. That is because it's a tax increase in California. Of course, we need a two-thirds majority to raise taxes for a specific purpose. The last results we saw, it was coming in at about 63%. So as the results come in, we'll be certainly watching for more updates on Measure C and, of course, all the other races. We saw mayoral candidates Barbara Bree and Scott Sherman here. We'll hope to have some reaction from their races later this evening. Maya and Amita, back to you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. Time now to turn to your money, and that means the measures on the ballot will go in alphabetical order and start with Measure A. That's the countywide SOS measure, or Safeguard Our San Diego Countryside Initiative. A look at the results so far. It's close at 51.1% for the yeses and 48.9% for the noes. This requires voter approval for the general plan. Now to Measure B, another countywide measure known as the Newland Sierra Development Better Choice Initiative. A check on those numbers now, a little bit more definitive. So far, the noes have 57.7% and 42.3% for the yeses. And now to Measure C. Now that's the San Diego City measure dealing with the convention center expansion. Yes, for a better SD. And right now it's looking like a 63.5% return for the yeses and 36.5% for the noes. And we will check in on some of the measures in a moment. Right now, we want to get an update on two congressional races. Let's start with the 49th District, where incumbent Democrat Mike Levin is being challenged by Republican Brian Marriott. The top two, of course, moving on to the general election. The numbers are looking pretty close. Brian Marriott so far at 50.1% and Mike Levin 49.9%. And finally, an update now on the 50th congressional seat. We showed you numbers earlier, but now we're seeing Amar Campa-Najjar still at 33.9%, Darrell Issa at 25.3%, and Carl DeMaio 21.4%. And the GOP here in San Diego County watching closely that race for the 50th and others as well. Let's turn now to KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar. She is at a Republican watch party. Priya.
Hey there, Maya. Yeah, you just mentioned one of those candidates. Brian Marriott just took the stage. We're seeing a lot of the federal candidates here at the Republican watch party speaking right now. About 10-20 minutes ago, we heard from a lot of those local candidates. Mayoral candidate Scott Sherman, Supervisor Kristen Gaspar took the stage. Now that we're hearing from the federal candidates, we're hearing more talk about Bernie Sanders, about the importance of having strong borders, gun rights, all of those things that you would expect hearing from those federal candidates. But you also mentioned the 50th district, and that's one of the races that everyone here is watching extremely closely tonight. You mentioned that Amar Campa-Najjar, the Democratic candidate, that back in 2018 came extremely close to beating Duncan Hunter, is actually in the lead right now. Darrell Issa is in second with about 25% of the vote, and behind him is Carl DeMaio. We really knew that this was going to be a tight race between Darrell Issa and Carl DeMaio, and I want to let you guys know that just moments ago I did receive an email from Carl DeMaio's spokesperson, and he basically said that tonight's initial results are in line with what they were expecting when they looked at the polling, but they're still optimistic that they're ultimately going to prevail once all the votes are counted. Now, we did see Darrell Issa make an appearance here at the Grant Hotel earlier tonight, and we heard from Tony Kravarik, who's the chairman of the San Diego County Republicans. He said we were going to be hearing from a lot of those congressional candidates, so we're hoping that Darrell Issa is going to take the stage as well. But of course, this is an extremely close race that everybody is watching. Both Darrell Issa and DeMaio both spent more than $2 million each leading up to this primary election today. And of course, those top two vote getters are going to move on to the general in November. So I'll be sure to be keeping an eye on the stage here and let you know if and when Darrell Issa takes the stage and what he has to say. But for now, reporting live from the Grant Hotel in downtown San Diego, Priya Sridhar, back to you guys in the studio.
And the Democrats, of course, have plenty to say here in San Diego County. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman is at a watch party. Matt, what's the mood like over there?
Well, Amita, I'm sure right now you can hear that applause as Councilmember Chris Ward is up on the stage. He's running for Assembly. We still have a long way to go for these election results coming in, but Democrats are excited. As you can see here at the Democratic headquarters downtown, a lot of people have filed in here now to watch these returns come in. We just had an appearance from Council President Georgette Gomez, who's running for Congress against Sarah Jacobs. She's here with all her support. She is currently in second place right now. Her challenger, Sarah Jacobs, also another Democrat, is in the lead with quite a margin in first. But a lot of races, as we're seeing the returns come in, are favoring Democrats, especially some of the big races we're keeping an eye on, like the 50th Congressional District. That seat might have a chance to flip blue. Amar Campenajar is expected to be here pretty much any minute now. Some of the candidates showing up late here as they make their appearances over at Golden Hall. Before they come here, they want to wait to make their quote-unquote victory speeches here. But as these council results are coming in for the council districts, a lot of them are favoring Democrats. And they just set up on the stage. They hope to see 8 council districts all go Democratic, as well as the mayor's race, which we're keeping our eye on. No sign of Todd Gloria right now, the Democrat who is leading that race. He's expected to be here and take the stage at 10:30, so we're keeping an eye on that. He obviously well ahead of challenger Scott Sherman, Republican challenger Scott Sherman, and Democratic challenger Barbara Bree. Also here in the 53rd District, Georgette Gomez is ahead over Sarah Jacobs, leading over Georgette Gomez. More than a dozen people in that race. In the 51st District, Juan Vargas, Scott Peters are ahead. And in the 49th race, a really close one, Mike Levin, no sign of him here. We're also seeing some of these supervisor seats. The District 1 supervisor seat currently held by Greg Cox. Democrats Ben Hueso and Rafael Castellanos look like they will be going for a runoff in November. But as of right now, we're just still waiting for more of these Democratic candidates to sort of file in here at the Democratic headquarters. Some of the candidates are up there. Mara Elliott was just up there running for city attorney. She, as a Democrat, has a substantial lead. She just went up there and made a speech, but we're still waiting for Todd Gloria. We're still waiting for Amar Campenajar. Maybe they're waiting to see more of that vote come in before they decide if they want to go up there on the stage. But once they do come, we'll be sure to bring you guys what they say. Here at the Democratic headquarters, we'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you so much for that report, Matt Hoffman. And you've heard the partisan take of how things are turning out so far. Let's bring back our 2 analysts tonight. Here again, Chris Genuine, editor and publisher of the Times of San Diego, and Seth Coombs, former editor-in-chief of San Diego City Beat. Seth, let's start with you. It looks like it will be a Democrat versus a Republican in the San Diego mayor's race. We have Democratic Assemblyman and former interim mayor, former San Diego City Councilman Todd Gloria on one side, and Republican San Diego City Councilman Scott Sherman. What are the policy differences between these two men?
Oh, I mean, well, it's pretty night and day. I mean, when it comes to Todd Gloria, he's about as blue as it gets. He's, has a huge track record, both as the city council member, interim mayor after the resignation of, who was it that had to resign? Filner, yes, sorry. A lot of names swirling around my head right now. So, yeah, served as interim mayor, then went to the state assembly and has been one of the more progressive members of that body. So as far as Scott Sherman goes, he's He's not super red Republican. I would say he's more of like he goes his own way. He had a recent not so much a controversy, but he famously recently said that he would not support the Trump administration using ICE or having ICE use local law enforcement. So he's not afraid to buck the Republicans when it comes to his personal philosophies.
So much to talk about. Let's just talk about the measures really quickly. Measures A and B. First of all, with A, it's a complicated measure, which puts the decisions of development in the voters' hands. What would this look like if it passes?
If it passes, then any development that adds 6 units more than currently allowed by zoning has to go to a countywide vote. That's going to make it very difficult to develop anything that isn't in the general plan. Measure B, which is very closely related to it, which is the Newland Sierra development, 2,100 homes just off I-15 north of Escondido. That's an example of a general plan amendment, but enough signatures were obtained so that it had to go to a vote. The message so far, and these are early numbers at this point, is that San Diegans don't want to see more home construction.
We were talking about that earlier. It is kind of interesting to see that if indeed Measure A passes, you're going to see more Measure Bs in the future, essentially. So the fact that Measure B is being essentially like rejected, like what does that say about like pro-development? Like we need more homes. Is it a rejection of the YIMBY agenda? I don't know.
So is it anti-sprawl or anti-growth?
It's a little bit of both.
It's going to be very difficult to build a large plan development anywhere in the rural areas. The general plan says most new housing, and there's 60,000 units in the general plan, but it's around existing villages, Alpine, Julian, Hamul, Valley Center, Borrego Springs, and those are going to face battles too when those developments come. So it's not clear that this is going to lead to more housing. There's another related one in a way, that's Measure G in Del Mar, which looks like it's heading for defeat. That would replace a fenced bluff area that no one has access to with a new hotel and affordable housing, condominiums. It's as if the voters there said, we don't want to change.
Right. Let's turn our attention to Measure C. This would raise money to expand the convention center. It's also billed as fixing streets, paying for street repairs, as well as reducing homelessness. It needs a two-thirds majority in order to pass today. What are its chances, Seth?
Well, right now, I'm actually pretty surprised to see it at, like, I think it was a 63%.
It's a 63.4%, so needs 66.
Yeah, it needs 66.6% to pass, and I'm actually surprised to see it doing so well. Again, very early. This could go down, it could go up. But it's also worth pointing out that even if it passes, it was set up as a citizens' initiative initially in hopes that, like, even if it didn't pass, they could challenge it in court and say, well, actually, we only really need 50%. So this is far for this. Whatever happens, it's far from over from both angles. Go ahead.
I'm going to try to gracefully segue into the 49th Congressional District race. We didn't get to cover it during the last
That's the
segment.
most surprising numbers I've seen so far tonight.
That's right. So Republicans have had their sights on this seat almost the day since Democrat Mike Levin was elected 2 years ago. How vulnerable is Levin to Republican challenger Brian Marriott?
It's really a good question. The numbers are very early. We were talking earlier about whether those are numbers from Orange County, because Brian Marriott is the mayor of San Juan Capistrano. He would definitely have a base there. Levin is new to politics. This was his first big office, but he has as much support in San Diego County, perhaps, as in Orange County. We'll have to see how it develops. No matter what happens, they will both be in the runoff, and I think that's important because in the general election, there could be a lot of national Democratic money that goes in to help Levin.
If it stays this close, there is going to be a lot of GOP money pouring into that race. As you pointed
exactly.
out.
And we've got to close it there temporarily. Sure. Seth Coons, Chris Genuine. We'll be back with more.
And we have more new results coming in right now, some key races. Let's start off with the city council races in San Diego. District 1, 8 potential candidates in all, but looking at the leaders right now, Joe LaCava at 25.9%, Aaron Brennan at 17.4%. Now to District 3. 5 candidates had qualified. Here are the top vote getters. Stephen Whitburn at 28.6%, Tony Duran at 22.9%. Turn now to District 5. 4 candidates qualified. Leading the pack is Marnie Von Wilpert at 39.6%. Joe Leventhal is at 37.7%. Now to District 7. 4 candidates in all. On the top right now is Raul Campillo. He is at 35.2%, and Noli Zosa at 30%. And finally, to District 9. 7 candidates here had qualified, and the top vote getters, Kelvin Barrios at 29.6%, Sean Elo at 21.6%.
Making sure all the ballots are in and accurate is the job of the county registrar and his staff. KPBS reporter Shalina Chatlani is live in Kearney Mesa with an update on how everything is going. Shalina, what do you have for us?
Yeah, Maya, I'm standing right in front of the county registrar's office, and as you can tell behind me, things have gone relatively smooth sailing today. The polls closed exactly at 8 p.m. In fact, people were celebrating, balloons were cascading from the ceiling of the registrar's office. Now, I did get a chance to speak to Michael Vu a little bit earlier, and he said, while it's unclear still, he says some of the reasons why the polls went so smoothly today could be because of potentially low voter turnout, or because this year there were 4 satellite polling locations where people were not only able to cast their ballots, but register on the same day. Now, despite this, I did get a chance to speak to a lot of voters today. Many of them said they were first-time voters, and they decided to come to the registrar's office because they simply hadn't registered before then. Here's one of them. She's a young woman who is actually an immigrant here and was her first time voting in the United States.
It went really well, and I have to say everything is so fancy. Yeah. And the machine is really straightforward, and yeah, and I voted in Chinese, in my mother tongue. Yeah, so that was pretty excited.
What you're hearing there is clapping in the back of the registrar's office there. Those were some of the first few ballots that were coming in. Now, this year we've got some fancy new machines that are able to count 10,000 ballots in an hour, and so the idea here is that we think we're going to be able to get a faster vote count today, but of course we'll be following that story and have an update later with that, hopefully when we get a chance to speak with Michael Vu. Shalina Chatlani live from the registrar's office. Back to you, Maya and Amita.
For staying with us for our special KPBS primary election coverage, I'm Maya Trabulsi.
And I'm Amita Sharma. We have more results and reaction to get to. You can also check results at the bottom of the screen, and we have our crews around the county. We also have 2 distinguished analysts joining us, Chris Genuine, editor and publisher of the Times of San Diego, and Seth Coombs, former editor-in-chief of San Diego City Beat. More with them in a moment.
And right now, though, let's go live to KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler in our newsroom. He's monitoring the biggest race of the night, the Democrats running to be the nominee. Max, what can you tell us?
Hi, Maya. It was a big night for Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders in California. He's gone out to now a 10-point lead at around 29% over former Vice President Joe Biden, who's at 19%, and billionaire Michael Bloomberg, who's at 17.6%. This is in stark contrast to how the rest of the night has played out for Sanders across the country, as Biden has been able to ride momentum from South Carolina to victories across the South and surprise victories in both Minnesota and Massachusetts. Sanders, at a speech tonight in Vermont, where it also had its primary that he won, focused on what the rest of the race is going to look like against Biden and contrasting his own policies with who the frontrunner is now in Biden. Okay, and so the differences between the two of them are pretty serious. Obviously, Sanders is farther to the left of Biden. Biden is much more centrist. He's been able to consolidate the moderate vote, especially when it comes to people who are voting for people like Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg, who dropped out earlier this week in a surprise. So if you look at these numbers now, Sanders, again, ahead. California had moved up its primary date to Super Tuesday, to March 3rd, to get more of a say in who the Democratic nominee will be. They've bucked the trend across the country tonight, and the question will be whether California has breathed new life into Sanders' campaign and has been able to help him fend off what is now a very formidable Biden campaign, which just weeks ago was not being taken all that seriously. Back to you in the newsroom.
But now, if the two Democrats come...
And the local race that garnered the most attention and political ad money, the hotly contested 50th congressional seat, that one, you recall, left vacant by Republican Duncan Hunter Jr., who resigned in January after pleading guilty to a felony charge of stealing campaign funds for his personal use. One Democrat, Amar Campa-Najjar, and three Republicans, Carl DeMaio, Darrell Issa, and Brian Jones, squared off in this race. And looking at the latest numbers right now, 33.9% for Amar Campa-Najjar, Darrell Issa is at 25.3%, and Carl DeMaio on these early returns, 21.4%. And finally, to another race where the incumbent is out of the political picture is the 53rd District, where Democrat Susan Davis is stepping aside after nearly 2 decades in the House. The Dems are looking to hold on to this seat, and candidates Sarah Jacobs and Georgette Gomez running for the Democrats, and Chris Stoddard, the top Republican. The numbers so far, 29.6%, Sarah Jacobs. Georgette Gomez is at 17.6%, and Chris Stoddard at 13.6%.
And these top races getting much of the attention and reaction tonight, especially at one of the largest gatherings in the county, and that is at Golden Hall. And that's where we find KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen. Andrew.
Well, thanks, Amita. Yeah, we've seen a lot of campaigns cycle in here at Election Central here at Golden Hall. A lot of folks waving their signs of their favorite candidate. Several news stations here giving live coverage, as well as us, of course. And one of the big races that we are watching in the city of San Diego is for the San Diego mayor. Kevin Faulconer, of course, being termed out at the end of this year. And right now we're watching Todd Gloria in the lead, a clear lead, and it appears to be we're watching a race for second place. Todd Gloria, State Assemblyman, Scott Sherman and Barbara Bee, both City Council members. Now, we did catch Scott Sherman just a few minutes ago, and I told him, you know, we're looking at a race for second place here, and I asked him what he is thinking right now.
Cautiously optimistic. I've learned after 7 years in this business never to really count your chickens before they're hatched. I mean, my first election back in 2012, I won by 54 votes. Took about a month of extra counting before it was all said and done. So I try not to think about those things too much and just let the chips fall where they may.
Now, this is a nonpartisan office, of course, but you are a Republican, and we've seen the trend in voter demographics in San Diego shifting more towards Democrats. If you are successful in making it through to the November runoff, tell me what your pitch is to the voters of the city about why you would be the best person to be the next mayor.
Well, you know, common sense isn't supposed to have a party affiliation attached to its name. And when I ran for re-election in 2016, it was a third Democrat, third Independent, third Republican. We won by over 60% of the vote. So there was some crossover appeal there. And my background as a small business owner for 27 years, it's bringing common sense down to City Hall and leading by example, hopefully has resonated with people for the last 7 years.
What are your plans for the rest of the evening?
Oh, probably going to go home and put my feet up and watch a little returns, maybe have an adult beverage and call it a night.
So you heard it, an adult beverage later this evening. I think a lot of us this evening will be looking forward to one of those after we finish this. Now, of course, these results could change. We could be seeing a different person making the November runoff, possibly Barbara Bee, as we watch the results come in. You know, we've seen races where the counting goes on several days, and those two candidates keep going back and forth between them. So that's the result for now. Amita and Maya, back to you in the studio.
Thank you for that report, Andrew. And right now, let's bring back our two analysts tonight. Here again, Chris Genuine, editor and publisher of the Times of San Diego, and Seth Coombs, former editor-in-chief at San Diego City Beat. Chris, I'm going to talk about something that a lot of people find boring, and that's the County Board of Supervisors. But it is important. It is the equivalent of a legislature for the county. It divvies up the money. It's got a multi-billion-dollar budget. It oversees economic issues. It oversees social issues like homelessness. It also decides land use issues, as we can see from Measure A and Measure B. Republican incumbent in District 3, Kristen Gaspar, faced two challengers. It looks like she's going to be in a runoff with economist and Professor Terry Lawson Reamer, a Democrat. Party watchers have been watching this race closely. Why?
Because it's one of the districts that could be flipped. The district that Nathan Fletcher is a Democrat. If that district turns Democratic, and then the first district is almost certainly going to be Democratic because there are only Democrats running there, then you get a Democratic majority on the Board of Supervisors. And that, as you said, it may sound boring, but it's not. It has an enormous impact on every aspect of life in San Diego County. What's interesting is that for an incumbent, for Kristen Gaspar, to be doing under 50%, and if you add up Tara Lawson-Reamer's vote and the vote of Olga Diaz, the Escondido city councilwoman, you get over 50%. So you've got Democrat votes that are higher than the vote for the incumbent Republican. There's a good chance that's going to flip.
And then let's talk about District 2. So Joel Anderson is at 37.9%. Steve Voss is at 34.2%. Is this surprising to you, especially considering the plethora of endorsements that Steve Voss, including Supervisor Diane Jacob?
Yes, Diane Jacob, she's termed out, obviously. She endorsed Steve Voss, as did the Union Tribune, it should be pointed out. I find the fact that Joel Anderson is winning, again, very early. Let's not count our chickens just yet, but the fact that he's winning is very interesting. I know that a lot of people do really like Joel Anderson. I know that he has a very excellent record of being in the state assembly and having like a very good record of bipartisanship. He's had some controversies as well. He famously called a lobbyist, I can't really use the term on KPBS, but he used a very bad word, but he was very repentant for it. He apologized, and when he ran for Board of Equalization and lost, I thought he was going to sort of drift off into the sunset, but he's come back, and this is a very surprising result. And Steve Voss is pretty much a household name after the shootings in Poway. He has a lot of name recognition, and the fact that he's not winning right now is very surprising.
And then there's District 1. Democrats have a huge voter majority in this district. A Republican didn't even enter this race, even though it's a Republican, Supervisor Greg Cox, who's vacating this seat. So we've got, it looks like possibly a runoff between State Senator Ben Hueso and Chairman of the Port of San Diego, Rafael Castellanos. Why didn't a Republican enter this race? Where is that competitive spirit?
Well, I think the district has changed. It's become much more Democratic. It's become more Hispanic. And Greg Cox was not a right-wing Republican. In fact, lately he's been voting with Nathan Fletcher, the one Democrat on the Board of Supervisors. He has been one of the most influential supervisors over 25 years. Everything from parks to mental health.
He's been in office since I was too young to vote. So, I mean, he's been there a while.
And had a big impact on this county. But I think with the changing demographics, it's only Democratic contenders. What's interesting to me is that Ben Hueso entered late and is doing better than Castellano, who has been campaigning for almost a year and a half at this point. Now, these are very early returns. It's only 19%. We'll have to see what happens. These are just the early voters. The people who are voting today, we haven't seen the results from yet. But in any case, it'll go Democratic. And then the question becomes, what happens in the 3rd district? Will Kristen Gaspar, who's been a friend of President Trump and very vocal about against immigration and for the wall, will that change there?
Okay, I'm going to have to jump back to the congressional races. Let's talk about the 53rd Congressional District. It looks like it's going to be Sarah Jacobs in a runoff with Georgette Gomez, the San Diego City Council president. As president of the San Diego City Council, Georgette Gomez has managed a budget. How does that experience stack up against Sarah Jacobs' experience? She worked at the State Department under Obama and for UNICEF.
Well, I think that Georgette Gomez has amassed a lot of experience between being president of the City Council, being chair of MTS, the Rapid Transit organization. She's learned how things work in San Diego. Now, the challenge is her district is not necessarily as progressive as she is. And while her district is in the 53rd area, her council district, there are a lot of very conservative places around there, like La Mesa and bits of El Cajon, bits of Chula Vista. So I think that's what Sarah Jacobs, who's more of a centrist, has going for her.
And we're going to wrap it there. We've got one more segment with the two of you, Chris Genowine, Seth Coons.
And we want to catch up right now on some of the measures on the ballot. Let's go first to Measure D. That's the San Diego City Auditor Reform Charter Amendment that would no longer allow mayor to appoint. And we're seeing a clear 80.5% yes and 19.5% no. Moving on now to Measure M, the Chula Vista bond measure to build housing for teachers. This authorizes $300 million in bonds for district school facilities. Yes votes have 51.9% so far, the no's at 48.1%. Let's move on to Measure P now. That's the Poway school bond. This authorizes $448 million in bonds for district school facilities. We're seeing the no at 52.6%, the yeses at 47.4%. And there is the Measure S, the Lemon Grove 3/4 cent tax increase to keep the city solvent, as supporters say. Should they add the 3/4 cent transactions and use tax? Well, most people so far are saying no, 58.7%, and the yes is at 41.3%. Now to Prop 13, the statewide school bond calling for $15 billion to improve building safety and address deferred maintenance to K through 12 and college schools. And so far, the no's have it at 57.9%, the yeses at 42.1%. We also have results now for the San Diego City Attorney's race. A lot of people watching this one quite closely. Mara Elliott, 66.5%. Corey Briggs at 24.6%. Finally, a check now on the 77th Assembly District. Now Democrat Brian Mainshine challenged by Republican June Cutter. Brian Mainshine at 54%. June Cutter is at 46%.
Democrats, of course, looking to gain seats and keep what they have already. So what are many of them saying tonight about the outcome so far? KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has been at Democratic Watch Party all night. He's got reaction. Matt?
Amita, it is electric inside this building right now. The man of the hour, Todd Gloria, candidate for mayor, leading in this race. He just took the podium. He's now mingling around doing his media interviews, but we'll show you what it looks like in here as Todd Gloria running for mayor. He is now making the rounds. He just came in, gave a huge speech in here to supporters. It was incredibly loud. He talked a lot about ending homelessness, creating more affordable housing, really trying to rally not just Democrats, he says, but rallying Republicans and also independents, because he says the next phase will not be easy. And the next phase, we know, really is a battle for kind of second place at this point between Republican Scott Sherman and Democratic candidate Barbara Bree. They are kind of neck and neck, as Gloria almost sitting at 40% of the vote right now. We'll see if he'll be able to carry that momentum into the general election. As we're still waiting for another close race we're following here is the 50th congressional seat that Duncan Hunter has vacated, and we're waiting for Amar Campanajjar. He is leading in this contest for the first time in about 40 years. There won't be a Hunter, but there may be a Campanajjar. He's supposed to be here any minute now. We're waiting on his arrival too. He's one of the most highly anticipated guests here. But Democrats really sweeping so far, as we see here. Lots of celebrations up there. I believe 8 council districts. Democrats are in the lead right now. And for county supervisor, at least one seat looks like 2 Democrats will face off in that general election, as the momentum in here is still high, as Todd Gloria is going around shaking hands. He said that he is very excited for this win. And now we're just waiting for some of the other candidates to come in and give their victory speeches. We haven't heard from Sarah Jacobs, who has a lead in the 53rd district. We did talk to Georgette Gomez, who is finishing second. She looks like she'll be heading to a runoff with Democratic candidate Sarah Jacobs. So 2 Democrats in the 53rd, that seat vacated by Susan Davis. As you see, lots of Todd Gloria supporters in here. They are excited. He's excited. But we're just waiting for anybody else to come here to the Democratic headquarters as we bring it back to you over here. Amar Campanajjar should be coming here any minute. We are waiting for him. Unclear if Sarah Jacobs will be coming here. We know Mike Levin, who's in a very close contest, he has not showed up here either. Live from the Democratic headquarters, we'll send it back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Matt. So how are local Republicans feeling about the night so far? Let's turn now to KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar. She is at a Republican watch party. Priya, what are you seeing there?
That's right. Well, it's not as exciting as the Democratic Watch Party, as you might have seen from Matt Hoffman. Things are actually winding down here. There was a lot of energy earlier in the night, but we heard from both local candidates, Supervisor Kristen Gaspar, mayoral candidate Scott Sherman, and then a bunch of the congressional candidates. Obviously, the race that everybody's watching the most closely here is the 50th congressional race. And as Matt Hoffman rightly pointed out, for the first time in more than 40 years, someone named Duncan Hunter will be representing that district, which right now that seat is vacant because, as you guys probably remember, Duncan Hunter resigned in early January after pleading guilty to misusing his campaign funds for personal expenses. Now, Matt Hoffman's awaiting Amar Campanishar over on his side. On this side, the two candidates that we're closely watching are Darrell Issa, who was a former 9-term congressman and resigned in 2018, and also Carl DeMaio, who is a former radio host and former San Diego City Councilman. Now we're seeing Darrell Issa taking the lead over Carl DeMaio right now. He did make an appearance here at the Grant Hotel earlier tonight, but he didn't take the stage. We did not hear from him at the podium, and we're being told that he actually is across the street over at Golden Hall. But this is expected to be an extremely close race. As you guys know, those top two vote getters will be moving on to the general election in November, and we'll be continuing to watch it very closely. Reporting live from the Republican headquarters downtown, Priya Sridhar, back to you guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Priya. And we want to update you now on a few key races. Let's get a check on the race for president. Now on the we're seeing Bernie Sanders at 29.4%, Joe Biden at 19.1%, Michael Bloomberg at 17.5%. Now to the congressional seat. One Democrat, Amar Campanishar, and 3 Republicans, Carl DeMaio, Darrell Issa, and Brian Jones. They squared off in this race. Looking at the latest numbers right now, Amar Campanishar is at 33.9%, Darrell Issa 25.3%, Carl DeMaio at 21.4%. Now let's go to the 53rd District. Candidates Sarah Jacobs and Georgette Gomez. They're running for the Democrats. Chris Stoddard and Famila Ramos for the Republicans. And we're looking at the numbers now. 29.5% goes to Sarah Jacobs in these early results. Georgette Gomez at 17.6%, and Chris Stoddard at 13.6%. And last to the San Diego mayor's race, Barbara Bree, Todd Gloria, Scott Sherman, and Tasha Williamson. Now the updated numbers so far, 39.5% at Todd Gloria, Scott Sherman, 26%, Barbara Bree, 24.3%.
And quickly, we want to go back outside to the county registrar's office. KPBS reporter Shalina Chetlani is live in Kearny Mesa with an update on how everything is going. Shalina.
Hey, Maya, the ballots are rolling in here at the county registrar's office, and I'm actually here with Registrar Michael Vu, who can give us an update on how everything's going. Of course, the question on everybody's mind is, have there been any hiccups tonight?
No, none thus far. We've actually had a number of the ballots coming from the polling locations coming into our office. I've seen a stack of those cartons going in there, and so we've got 40 scanners right now scanning in all the precinct ballots, and so everything's going smoothly as planned thus far.
So earlier in the show, we were talking about how there were fewer voters here at the registrar office than in the past election. Why do you think that is?
Well, ultimately, the question is from the past election, it was a 32-year high when it comes down to a gubernatorial general election. The question was whether or not that momentum would build up to the 2020 presidential primary election, and I don't think we really saw that this go-around. It really is trending to the 2016 presidential primary that we conducted 4 years ago.
Yeah, so now, of course, California does have a few weeks to count all of the ballots that are coming in, and we do have these fancy new machines that are counting them really fast. How long do you think it's going to take to count all of these ballots, and how many do we have in right now?
Well, although we have these more efficient machines and scanners that we have here, well, really what it comes down to is we have to verify every single one of these mail ballots as well as the provisional ballots. So I anticipate it's going to still take us approximately 30 days before I'll certify the election.
Well, I can't thank you enough for talking with us. This has been County Registrar Michael Vu. I'm live from the County Registrar's office. Shalina Chetlani, back to you at the station, Amita and Maya.
Thank you for that report, Shalina. And a good time now to get a few final thoughts from our chief analysts. Here again, Chris Genowine, editor and publisher of the Times of San Diego, and Seth Coombs, former editor-in-chief of San Diego City Beat. I want to turn the next question to you, Seth. We talked about it before the show. Based on the results tonight from Super Tuesday, do you see Sanders or Joe Biden getting the required 1,991 delegates before the Democratic National Convention this summer?
In a word, no. I don't. There's so many more states to go, and as Chris pointed out earlier, some of those Midwestern Rust Belt states are going to go to Joe Biden, and some states like Washington and probably Oregon are going to go to Bernie Sanders, and you're going to see both of them continue to chalk up wins. If I was to speculate, I think that Elizabeth Warren is going to drop out probably pretty soon. Her people will likely vote for Sanders after she drops out. And so I think it's just going to get even more heated, even more ugly. And long story short, I don't think either one will end up with enough delegates at the convention.
We may also get Bloomberg dropping out as well.
This is true, and that would
his
only
showing was so bad compared to I think what his hopes were.
I think and I think that'll only help Biden. Yeah.
Well, I have to ask: did Bloomberg get a return on his money?
He's had an influence, but it's a very expensive amount of influence. He won American Samoa.
Hey, it's better than nothing.
As an internet publisher, I'm grateful for all of the advertising, and I hope it continues in some form or fashion. I think money doesn't always buy success in politics. Look at Joe Biden. He didn't spend any money in some of these states he won, like Massachusetts and Minnesota. Who would have thought?
I mean, it's showing that building connections, building relationships, and building on that is what is getting candidates further.
That's right. And I think when we look back at a pivotal moment in this race, it goes back to one man's endorsement, Congressman Sam Clyburn of South Carolina, which seemed to just push Joe Biden over the top, over 50% of the vote. But if you get a brokered convention, how does the eventual Democratic nominee unify the party, Seth?
Well, the key word there is brokered, and they're going to have to get some of the delegates that were once pledged to people like Buttigieg to come over to it seems likely that Biden would court them heavily. To answer your question, I'm not sure. To unify a party that seems so divided right now in the very left progressive candidate and the more centrist old-fashioned Democrat. It's going to be really hard, and I think that Trump's sitting, in the White House right now with a big smile on his face.
So, if Elizabeth Warren drops out tomorrow, how much is her endorsement worth? I'm guessing she'll endorse Bernie Sanders. They seem to be the most ideologically alike. How much is her endorsement worth?
I think it'll help, but at the same time, if Biden gets Bloomberg, they're going to pretty much cancel out. They're both at about the same level on these states at this point. And, I've been thinking about this. You make a very good point about it being a very divided party, but, the Republicans were very divided as well, and Trump still won. So,
true, yes,
there's sometimes, things can change so much. As we've seen over the last 72 hours, things can change so much, and they can still change dramatically.
Yeah, I mean, it's as far, this is to your point, you're absolutely correct, but this is a very different beast, I feel. I feel that they're so ideologically divided that I think that, and I'm going to go there, I think that within the next few weeks you're going to start hearing murmurings of Sanders, doing a third party candidacy possibly, and I think there's going to be a lot of people coming out of the woodwork to speculate as to what's going to happen. A lot of VP names are going to be mentioned. So
Kamala Harris being one of them.
Kamala Harris, I think.
Stacey Abrams.
Stacey Abrams was we were talking about earlier.
What about Pete Buttigieg?
Well, I think that Biden would be well served to pick somebody more like Klobuchar, as she can probably deliver some of those Midwestern states that Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. But it's a little too early for that, but we'll see.
Well, it's been a really interesting, exciting, and in some cases surprising night so far. What has been something what has surpassed your expectations the most?
Well, we've been talking about the national dramatic change. But locally, I'm really surprised at the 49th district. We're seeing some new votes, some new tallies that Levin is pulling ahead, but it's very, very close. Usually incumbents are way out ahead.
Yeah, we're seeing Mike Levin is at 50.2%, Brian Marriott at 49.8%. Yeah.
And, Scott Sherman has done extremely well for someone who entered the race a day or two before the last date for filing, after Barbara Bree had spent 11 months campaigning hard for it. So I think that's surprising as well.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I'm actually surprised and not surprised. I thought that Scott Sherman was very smart in sort of, laying out behind the scenes and letting the two Democrats sort of tear each other apart with Barbara Bree and Todd Gloria, and they kind of did him a favor. He just kind of sat there and was just and I think that there is enough conservative voters here who will come out and say, "Oh, that's the one Republican in the primary, and I'm going to vote for him." And yeah, it's surprising, but it's surprising, but not surprising for me.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up there, gentlemen. I want to thank you both, Chris Genuine, editor and publisher of the Times of San Diego, Seth Coons, freelance journalist, former editor-in-chief of San Diego City Beat. Thank you so much for your insightful analysis, Maya.
That's right. And we invite you to stay with KPBS for updated election results and reaction. You can always check us out online at kpbs.org, and we'll have all the latest results tomorrow on Morning Edition. And if you wake up late or can't join us until later, you can always catch Midday Edition. That's tomorrow at noon, with more results and more analysis that you can only get here on KPBS. That's 89.5 FM. And that will do it for this special March primary election coverage. We want to thank you and our guests for joining us. We look forward to a very interesting election season as we head into November.
It's going to be so exciting and likely full of surprises. Thank you for joining us, and have a good evening.